Happy Halloween, everybody! I love October. I love this time of year. You get the costumes, you get the sweets. You can tell that I've been gorging on both of them. Deck the halls with lots of blood. Fa la 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 la. I also love horror movies. I love the franchises from Halloween, Friday the 13th, to also some of the standalone films like the Babadook, Oculus, Sinister, and oh yeah, that last one's become a franchise now, hasn't it? That's disappointing. However, I don't just enjoy horror films for the scares. Growing up on films like this, I have a pretty high threshold for scares and I very rarely get spooked or creeped out, but I love watching horror films for their sheer craft. See, when it comes to directing, many genres have transferable skills. You can direct a romance movie and apply those same skills to a drama, or a historical epic. You can also go from a sci-fi movie to a war movie or vice versa. Obviously, styles do sometimes change, but the fundamentals can remain the same. But with horror, those skills aren't easily transferable. Horror requires its own craft. You wouldn't approach a horror film like you would approach a drama movie or an action film. Visually, you need to take the audience on a completely different ride. You need to misdirect them, you trick their eyesight, you make them believe things that aren't there through cinematography, lighting, sound design, and other filmmaking fundamentals that are honed in a different way. No other genre does that except for, hybrids, horror dramas, or horror comedies. Call me a film snob, but I love watching horror films just to admire the sheer craft that goes into making and directing a great horror movie. But there's one subgenre of horror that does not require any technique whatsoever, and that's found footage. The format that basically says sod it to basic filmmaking fundamentals and tries to scare its viewers with shaky cam, obstructed vision, and a lack of character and structure. Let's cut right to the chase, shall we? I think that found footage is the worst thing to happen to the horror genre since... yeah, it's just the worst thing to happen to horror. Let's not mince words here. The only reason this subgenre has become popular amongst filmmakers is because it's really cheap to make. Film them on location, get unknown actors, you don't need any sort of editing or effects, and bing bang boom, you've got a horror film. Or not, because 99% of the time, these films don't even elicit a mild gasp, let alone actual scares. The worst offender, without question, is the Paranormal Activity franchise. While the Blair Witch Project was really the first movie to gain widespread recognition, it was the Paranormal Activity franchise that brought it into the mainstream for the worst. First of all, the movie's a fucking snorefest, with only one creepy moment involving a Ouija board and one scary moment where the main character gets dragged out of bed. For what's meant to be one of the scariest movies of all time, I think it's only fair to expect a bit more than that. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't really say bad things about it because the movie, it's totally based on a true story. It's found footage. They really found the footage, and these are real events. And the footage I'm watching, it belongs to the police department. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, because if there was a paranormal murder and police had access to the footage, they would totally edit it and release it to film festivals or put it in movie theatres and charge audience members $10 a pop to go see it. Do people think that when they make these found footage movies that they try and pretend it's real? Do they think that the audience members are fucking stupid? Here's the thing, folks, found footage horror movies are basically an excuse for lazy hack filmmakers to make a horror movie without incorporating any actual talent. Now let's do a thought experiment, let's do a comparison. Look at this sequence from James Wan's The Conjuring. Here's the context. Lorraine Warren, played by Vera Farmiga, is looking at a mirror in the lid of an old-fashioned music box. Apparently when the music stops playing, a child called Rory can be seen in the mirror. Now there's some basic horror cinematography here. There's the natural anticipation of waiting for the music to stop and the camera is creeping closer and closer, but notice how Lorraine is off-center in the frame here. If you ever want to demonstrate normality or complacency in a scene where there's only one person, you usually have the actor in the center of the frame, but simply by having Lorraine on the left subconsciously puts the audience on edge because they'll be anticipating movement or activity coming from the right. This helps with the context of being told that Rory will appear behind her in the mirror's reflection. Add to that the continuing zooming of the camera, which tightens the frame, making things more unsettling as Lorraine continues to stay on the left, but the frame is becoming more and more intimate, and the set behind her is a cabinet with glass windows. Put something like that in the background out of focus to prevent it from becoming too dominant but still being identifiable implies that something is going to be seen there. This staging helps build the tension even further without even really doing anything. Now, that's how a horror movie is made. By comparison, let's take a look at this sequence from the found footage movie from earlier this year, The Gallows. Okay, God, where to begin? Actors shouting loudly to imply drama, deliberately cutting away from the action, meaning the tension isn't being dragged out, as well as creating a plot hole as to how they escaped, obscuring the view even though nothing noteworthy is currently happening, shaking it around to give the audience motion sickness. Basically, if I got a bit too technical for you in my analysis of a scene from The Conjuring and a scene from The Gallows, it could be summed up thusly: good filmmaking versus bad filmmaking. And that's not even getting into the sheer technical shortcomings of found footage movies from people who really should know better, like low battery symbols appearing on the footage. Seriously, when has that icon ever popped up when fucking watching the footage back? Being able to capture audio from people literally dozens of meters away, always having perfect exposure, these are aspects that anyone who has operated a camera before should be able to pick up on and be immediately taken out of the movie. Many argue that the found footage genre is about increasing immersion, but when something like that happens, it ironically takes you out of the experience. Look at this scene from The Gallows again. This is the first jump scare in the movie where the character filming everything does a jump scare to the camera. Okay, let's break this piece of shit down. First of all, the movie opens by saying that this footage is property of the Beatrice, Nebraska Police Department. They are the ones editing this footage together supposedly for evidence, for God knows what. So why would they include this scene? Nothing paranormal is happening that would help the investigation. Secondly, fuck every movie that does a cop-out scare that isn't even remotely earned, especially as the first scare in the movie. But why would the police add a jump scare to what is supposedly evidence? Wouldn't that be considered tampering? Isn't that illegal? Holy shit, this movie. Then we have people who film everything even though they're meant to be running for their life, talking to the camera instead of the person holding the camera, using the camera as a torch, and to film instead of just using the torch to save battery power, etc. Oh, and it also doesn't help that the camera quality is 1,000 times better than the camera would suggest. In The Visit, the teenage girl filming the events is supposedly using a DSLR, but here's the actual camera they filmed the movie with. Filmmakers, if you're going to go for a found footage approach, fucking commit to it. Because of aspects like this, the found footage genre is objectively broken and flawed when it comes to horror, at least in its current form. A while ago, I was asked on Facebook how I would make a horror movie done in the style of found footage, and my response was just to immediately quit. It would be like asking an action movie director to make an action movie in the style of, I don't know, a radio drama. You just don't have the right tools for the job, and you are immediately crippling your movie's prospects. And it also doesn't help that making a movie found footage practically guts your movie's chances of having a cohesive structure or interesting characters. I've been going through every found footage horror movie I've seen, and I don't think I can name a single character in any of these movies that undergoes an arc. None of these characters change, their situations don't change, it just escalates. They either start off not scared or not believing, and by the time the movie ends, they're scared or being a believer in the paranormal. That's not a character arc, that's just a change in an emotional state. Because of the limitations of found footage, there is no opportunity to get to know these characters as people because they're already putting on a front for the camera or are too busy running away from shit. Here's a test. You have 1 minute to name a single supporting character in a found footage film. Go. Time's up. See, you couldn't, could you? Most of the time, the ending of these found footage horror films are always the fucking same. Almost everyone dies, something eats the camera, or there's a text dump. Some movies don't even have the common courtesy to have a fucking ending. Take The Devil Inside, which had the sheer fucking nerve to end the movie halfway through and direct audience members to a website. A fucking website. Is this a movie or fucking Destiny? The Quiet Ones is another example of a found footage movie that is crippled by its ending. See, 70% of the movie is conventionally filmed, and it's not badly done. It's shot well, the acting and the mood is good, there are even a few good scares, but every so often they devolve into found footage bullshit. It's meant to be a movie that is based on real events, and that the photos and the videos in the film are supposedly real, but the movie ends with all of the footage being destroyed and burnt to ashes. If all of the found footage has been destroyed, then how the fuck did they find the footage? This fucking genre! But if these movies are so objectively broken and terrible by their very conception, then how come they're so successful? You know, apart from the fact that terrible movies make money all the frickin' time. Well, their profit margins for one thing. These movies are so cheap to make that all they need is a modest opening weekend to make bank. But I have another theory. Found footage movies are horror movies for people who don't like horror movies. Some people don't want to be challenged, they just want loud noises! See, real horror is subliminal. Real horror is craftsmanship, not loud jumps and shaky cam. That can happen, but that is not the foundation on which to build a horror movie. But because that type of stuff appeals to lowest common denominator audiences, these objectively terrible films find success. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that just because you're a horror movie and you do not use found footage means you're automatically good. Hell no. Movies recently like Annabelle, Ouija, The Apparition, those are conventionally filmed horror movies and those are all terrible, but I think I've seen pretty much every single found footage movie to get a theatrical release over the past 15 years, and none of them have been any good. Seriously, none of them. Not one. But what about other genres that use found footage and that just not horror? Let's get horror out of the equation. Let's take a look at some non-horror found footage films. Is the format any good there? The gold standard, of course, is Chronicle, which isn't a horror movie and thus has much more leeway, and while the found footage gimmick is there to cut down the budget, it actually does serve a purpose in terms of character. The main character is using his telekinetic powers to operate the camera, not only giving us more dynamic shots, but the fact that he's so obsessed with documenting his often brutal acts informs his growth and change as a character. He's kinda like an Elliot Rodgers, where he rants to the camera about how great he is and how superior he is to people, and that egotism enhances the movie.
A lion does not feel guilty when it kills a gazelle, right? You do not feel guilty when you squash a fly. And I think that means something. I just think that really means something.
TrollHunter sells itself as a horror film, but it's actually more of a mockumentary, and even if you could argue that it wasn't, it's still not really a horror movie as it's more of a comedy. Same goes for The Visit. It sells itself as a horror, but it's actually a comedy filmed in a mockumentary style, and that style, once again, is used to inform character. In fact, the weakest moment of both of those films is when they do try and bring in the scares, because shaky cam found footage just doesn't have that nuance to get that across. And when they do try to get across that nuance, it feels so out of place. I hate to bash this movie again, but going back to The Gallows, where the main character, it's near the end of the movie, he's trying to comfort his friend, so he places the camera on her fucking shoulder, and I'm sorry, he places the camera on her friend's shoulder so he can get a dramatic shot of himself. Why am I making a big deal of this? I can see the comment section telling me to just not watch these type of films if I hate the subgenre so much, but that's not really the issue here. Besides, it's my job to watch all of these films, so you're basically telling me to not do my job properly, which isn't cool. No, the issue is that what happens here is that more and more of these objectively terrible found footage movies are getting made, and a whole generation of future filmmakers will think that this is what horror is all about, when it absolutely isn't. And worst yet, when superb horror directors like Guillermo del Toro, Jennifer Kent, James Wan, Hideo Nakata put honest-to-God effort in the composition of their shots, the atmosphere of their movies, and honing their skills for this unique and awesome genre, and when a movie like Crimson Peak, a richly detailed, entertaining but creepy horror movie, flounders at the box office, but The Gallows, Paranormal Activity, or Devil's Due succeeds, we're essentially telling Hollywood with our wallets, no, we do not want good filmmaking. We do not want these talented individuals playing in the horror sandbox. And that is fucking depressing.